Welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared, and today we have yet another guest interview. This time we have Max MVP Presley. Max, welcome to Under Two Capes.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight. But yeah, like I said, thank you for having me on, and should be fun.
Exactly. So as you know, if you watch my interview with Wes, I have a couple of icebreaker questions for you. So let's get into those. Number one, what got you into comics?
So great question. For me, it was, I thought I walked into a comic store thinking that it was just a toy store. They had all the action figures on there. And then I saw the dollar bin just filled with, like Image Comics and Top Cow and X-Men stuff. And it was just these like gnarly, big, like beefy dudes and like these action moves and like just having these great fights. And so I was probably like 8 or 9 at the time and just started like picking up everything I possibly could and just grabbing stuff from the dollar bin or at that point it was like the quarter bin. It was like 25 cents a comic. And I'd just go through them and I'd read them and I'd have, have friends over and we'd look through them and stuff. And then after that, I just, over the years, it just became something that I could use and as escape and as something that I just really enjoyed the stories and the characters. And you get so enveloped in these storylines that, you fall for the characters and the teams and the writing and mostly the artwork. I was obsessed with the artwork as well. And so, yeah, I just found it to be one of the best storytelling mediums other than like movies, and just really fell in love with it. So over the years, as I matured, my reading matured and I went through different, like instead of just single issues, I would go through the omnibus or I would get the trade paperbacks or, hardcover formats. And I would just flip through these things and then it turned into statues. And then you have the room that looks like this, so your hobby just kind of evolves over time. But sorry, that's a very long answer to just say no. I started reading as a kid.
I started with trades because that's generally because the way I want to start having a complete storyline. And it was like, okay, I'll just start with trades. Then I just recently got the omnibus for Grant Morrison's JLA, and I figured that'll take me about a couple of years to get through because that thing is like has like the girth of the Bible. So I'm like, oh boy.
And it's heavy too. I mean, like just trying to read it, like your arm gets tired because you're like, it's so heavy and you're trying to flip through the pages. But that's a great run, man. It's
so good
because it's got Kyle Rayner as a Green Lantern, which you don't really see too often in Justice League. So, but yeah, great run, and I think I actually, I have that.
Yeah, you have it too
over here as well. Yeah, I don't know if you can see the little.
My favorite line, my favorite so far, my favorite scene from that is when they're fighting the White Martians and Batman finds out they're White Martians. So he just draws a circle and gasoline around them, lights it, and then goes, "Let's go." And I'm like, that is so Batman.
It's a great tactic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't beat it. So love it.
All right. Question 2, DC or Marvel?
Ooh, that's tough, man. I think I would have to say Marvel. I think DC, if they utilize their characters like they did with Marvel, DC would blow Marvel out of the water every single time. Like we're talking Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Those 3 alone could take the comic book industry by storm, and no one would have a chance at trying to beat them. So I think DC has the most potential, but I think Marvel has done the best with the characters that they have.
The problem with DC, and I talked to Wes about this, is that you're right, they really don't know how to properly use like because let me put it this way, when you think of DC, you think of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, but they don't use, when was the last time we had a truly memorable Wonder Woman run? Which is sad because after the movie, she's like this huge superhero.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, first off, they have to stop changing her origin because one moment she's like a child of Zeus. Another moment she's like molded from clay and brought to life by Zeus. And I'm like, okay, can we just get one solid origin? Then we can get to having really good stories.
Yeah, it's the one that I would always equate it to is the George Perez run. And everyone, from what I've heard, that's like a definitive Wonder Woman story that's a long run of Wonder Woman stuff. But yeah, like everyone kind of forgets, and like you said, her origin has been changed so many times that there's really no definitive, like, if you need to read Wonder Woman, like, you need to go to this story. So yeah, and I think she's such an underutilized character that yeah, she could really do some damage. I mean, she really is the equivalency of a Superman for female superheroes. So it's unfortunate that we haven't had a storyline or something like George Perez's run, since then. Like you said, especially because when the movie came out, everyone wanted to pick up Wonder Woman comic.
It's kind of funny how it had the opposite effect with Captain Marvel, in that the movie comes out and not a lot of people are fans of Captain Marvel. And I'm like, well, that's understandable, because really Marvel has really, like, I think, turned a good character in Carol Danvers and kind of like made her not really that much of an appealing character. I mean, she technically killed Tony Stark. She was the villain behind like Civil War II. So I'm like, can you stop? That's my problem with Marvel. They keep character assassinating their characters, like with Iron Man in Civil War I, Carol Danvers, Civil War II, Captain America in Secret Empire. So I'm like, oh, come on, guys. Punisher, every time he shows up and kills a bunch of people.
Yeah, the difficult thing with the Carol Danvers that is now Carol Danvers from Marvel is she has no character. She has no she has no personality. It's just this stoic block that no one can relate to, no one can see themselves in. She has no relatability, and I think that is, I don't know if that's necessarily the writers, the editors, or whatnot, but they've just made her this generic, strong hero, and there's nothing really defining her or separating her from the rest. Whereas, like, in previous years, we've seen that characterization of her. But yeah, I agree. Marvel really likes to kill off their characters. DC started to do that once they realized that it worked really well, But unfortunately, yeah.
I think the problem with Carol Danvers and the problem with Marvel, it's not really a problem, but it's the advantage DC has over Marvel, is that Marvel was trying to have their version of Wonder Woman. And when you think about it, most of Marvel's like well-known female characters, they didn't have the rights to, like Storm, Rogue, Susan Storm. So it's like they had to go with Carol Danvers. But my problem with Carol Danvers is that when you look at her history, it's been kind of, it's not the best, i.e., and I've mentioned this in the podcast, her technically sleeping with and being impregnated with her son and then giving birth to her son in that Avengers 200 storyline. That I told that to my co-host, and he's like, no, that's not a real storyline. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, you would be surprised. Like, if you told a normie or someone who maybe doesn't read comics or maybe even doesn't watch the movies, but if you're like, yeah, Scott Lang, like Ant-Man, he definitely beats his wife. In one of those comics, he was like one of those. I think
Hank Pym.
Or sorry, yeah, Hank Pym. Sorry, that was my bad. And so yeah, you realize that and you go, oh my God, that's awful. And these are actual storylines that have happened. Yeah, so it's quite interesting to see, like, when you read some of these old storylines and you're like, man, that's a real thing, and then you tell someone else and they go, that's not real, and you got the proof right there.
My co-host Lad, he's a huge Spider-Man fan, so when I told him about Norman Osborn sleeping with Gwen Stacy, I thought he was going to have a heart attack.
Dude, that
like, who's editing these books that they let this get by?
Wait, did Nick Spencer just retcon that in the most?
Yeah, thank God.
All right.
He had to.
Okay, thank God.
So I'm like, what the heck?
I was so worried that was going to become like, now everyone knows now that this is a thing. So Nick probably set out. He was like, he probably knew. He was like, listen, these are my final issues on Amazing Spider-Man. I got to go out with a bang, and by doing so, I'm going to retcon this thing. So, which is
as far as I heard, it was a great run. So.
Yeah.
So, DC is guilty of this too, because back in like Dark Knight Returns, just Death of Superman era, they wanted their edgy story for Wonder Woman. So their idea of this, and I think it was like Mark Millar jokingly, he was not serious about this, recommended, let's just do a storyline called The Rape of Wonder Woman.
Oh
and DC, wait, it gets worse. DC legit thought he was serious and started work on this storyline. I'm like, what?
Why do I, like, the sad thing is that there's a part of me that's like, you know what, I can see them doing that, you know, and that's like,
particularly nowadays.
Oh yeah, for sure. That they wouldn't understand the irony behind it or the implications that how awful of a story that would be, you know.
Yes.
And people just take it as gospel and they just say, oh good, yeah, well, we should start looking into writing that. It's like, no. Like, that's,
I mean, we saw the reaction when John Ridley had Superman raped in prison.
I mean, and he's
like,
still,
the heck.
To this day, even in the article that, because he spoke to, there was an interview that he did, and he spoke to one of the gentlemen and said, you know, like, it was never my intention of doing this, or I kind of hinted towards him. He like never explicitly said this is what happened, but he quoted by saying, you know, we needed something to happen to Superman that would mentally be demoralizing to him, to where he would never be able to recover from this. And I was like, oh, so that's essentially what you did to him in prison, like in that internment camp. Like, you for sure raped him. Yeah. And he won't outwardly say it, but I'm fairly certain that like that was his intention the whole time.
Which is interesting, is that there's an easy way to mentally like snap Superman. Just make him believe he killed Lois Lane. We saw what happened in Justice. That worked.
Make him believe he killed anyone. I mean, Superman's weakness, everyone says that Superman's weakness is kryptonite, which is. However, his like real weakness is the fact that he wants to save everyone. And the unfortunate thing is he can't, you know, there are going to be casualties, but he because he has such human traits and human qualities, he feels empathy and compassion. And so when someone dies on his watch, he feels like it's his fault. And especially like with Lois Lane, the love of his life. But there's the run with, I want to say it was Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And it was just 2 issues. And in one of the issues, I think Lana Lang was killed, and he like snaps, like when he finds out that she's dead, he absolutely snaps and is about to just like, you know, go crazy on everyone. So that is a way to kind of get to Superman's vulnerability other than kryptonite. And like you said, it would be a mind game if they did that. They don't have to, you know, rape him in a prison camp. That's like, it's very lazy writing, one.
Yes, it is.
And it's very it's not creatively, there's no creative integrity in that, you know.
Exactly.
So it was very unfortunate to read that issue, and then later in the issue you see him like envisioning him like just absolutely murdering the gentleman who had, or the guy who had, you know, put him in the internment camp in the first place. And that was also against Superman's character. Like, he has rage, but he would never go so outwardly as to just murder someone in cold blood. So I think John Ridley got the character all wrong, not just because of the internment camp, but on so many different levels too.
Yes. Did you read, so DC did like a storyline for their online game called DC Universe Online Legends, I think. And in that, he kills Lois Lane by accident because Brainiac like does something to make him lose control of his powers. He straight up flies through Brainiac's ship, kills him. It's not actually Brainiac, it's the drone. That's the way to always do comic books. Then he just books it and basically pulls a Batman v Superman and just goes brooding in space. So I'm like, you could have done that. In other words, there's 80 different options you could have picked before you settle on that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and this was also on, and I think you mentioned this before, on like what editor would allow this to go through the vetting process of like, they read that and they're going, yeah, that looks good. Let's print it. You know, it's like, I
particularly if it's the character that started your whole company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm like, what?
He's well, I want to say he's the flagship to DC, but at this point in time, it
Batman.
really is Batman. Yeah, you nailed
we
it.
Saw all the solicits came out and it's like 8,000 Batman books and like a couple of Superman books.
Yeah, which is so unfortunate because, like, it's, you know, I did a live stream the other day with Nerdette's Newsstand, and there were a couple other panelists on there. And we were just basically talking about are more like with the oversaturation of Batman titles, is it going to hurt the other characters' titles, or is it just going to make the sales go down on DC like as a whole? But yeah, I mean, have you been? Are you a big like Batman? Are you more Batman or Superman, or have you been?
I'm more Superman. Well, I'm more a fan of all of the Trinity. Except here's the thing. So I'm a through and through DC fan. I also like Marvel, but DC is like where I got my start. How I got into comics because of the Justice League animated series. Yeah. So you could, that was some quality entertainment right there, brother.
So good, dude. Yeah.
I'm like, I just started rewatching Justice League from the very beginning, and I'm like, why can't we get more stories like this instead of Superman being raped in prison? This is so much better. But anyway,
it really is. Yeah.
My problem with what DC is doing is that DC has so many amazing characters. Hell, I have the character encyclopedia that's like 500 pages of like every character DC has, but it's all Batman books that they're putting out. And my other point is that I recently watched the video that you put out with, I think it was Reggie Collects on wokeism and diversity in comics. Great video, by the way.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate that.
My thing with that is that, yes, 100% we're for DC could put out they could provide representation to so many other different groups without race bending, gender bending, sexuality bending characters. If they just published other characters other than Batman, it's ridiculous right now. I'm like, come on, guys. We get it. You like Batman. DC stands for Detective Comics. We get it. But the thing is that if you're going to complain about this, there's an easy way to fix this. And you're aware that Batman is not the only member of the Justice League.
Yeah, man, there really are like a plethora of characters. And I'm no DC scholar, but you could ask someone who's been reading since like, the 70s or 80s, and they could tell you way more characters than I ever could. But I mean, you and I grew up probably on John Stewart, Green Lantern,
yes,
from the Justice League animated series.
But to the point where when I was reading the actual comics and I saw Hal Jordan for the first time, I was like, wait, what? It was jarring.
Yeah, a lot of my friends, when I would tell them like, Hal Jordan or Ryan Reynolds is going to play Hal Jordan in this movie, like when that movie came out, they were like, who's Hal Jordan? I thought it was John Stewart. So many of us have grown up on John Stewart, and especially like for me, and I think I mentioned this in the interview with Reggie, but John Stewart is a former Marine, and me serving in the Marine Corps, I found a lot of ties with him. Oh, thanks, dude. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was something that Wes and I we gave each other a hard time because he's Air Force and I'm Marine Corps. So, it was like I could see the character. I could see myself in the character through the moralistic values that he does have, which is like, honor, courage, and commitment, which are the three traits of the Marine Corps, like the big three traits of the Marine Corps. And he exemplified those exceedingly throughout the Justice League animated series. So I was like, man, I want to be like John Stewart, And
my favorite John Stewart scene is actually the second arc of Justice League, is when he's fighting the Manhunters and they're about to like destroy Oa, and he just walks up, even though he's not sure he has the power, and just throws up the ring and starts saying the Lantern Oath and like destroys everyone. I was like, I'm the guy that gets chills every time I hear that Lantern Oath, because whoever wrote that is a genius, because that was the most like jazzing up like oath I think in all of pop cultural dumb, and that's including like the Mandalorian phrase, but like there's so much competition, but I think Green Lantern is the one.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, man. It's hard to find other Green Lantern fans, but when you do find them, they are like hardcore Green Lantern fans. And that oath to this day, like you said, gives me chills. And then now I don't know, that's a good question. I'd have to look at that and see who actually created it. But the most I remember seeing those oaths were what was in the like Blackest Night, because not only did we get the Green Lantern oath like repeated very frequently, but we had the Blue Lantern Corps and their saying, and the Red Lantern Corps, which is just like brutal, And so each one of them have their own oaths now, and it's just like I love that. I know Doc from the Comics Aficionados. I think it's Doc.
Yes, Doc.
I don't think he's a fan of the rainbow, the whole rainbow collection of lanterns, but I think it's such a great storyline.
My favorite scene of Blackest Night is when like the other people get rings, like Wonder Woman's a Star Sapphire, Lex Luthor's an Orange Lantern, because it fits their characters. My only problem is that why didn't Superman get a Blue Lantern ring? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, he is the symbol of hope itself. I would have loved to see
That's what the S stands for.
Exactly. So they did our boy dirty without giving him that Blue Lantern ring, but that's okay. I mean, the whole rest of the series was done so well, and Jeff Johns and Ethan and Skyver really did something special. And no matter what people think of EVS right now or what's going on with him and his comics right now, you can't deny that he and Jeff created something like totally new and original with that storyline, and it still holds up today. I mean, it will hold up as one of the greatest Green Lantern runs in history. So.
It is, because it was basically DC's version of Star Wars. What I loved about that run is that it started off, and like when they're fighting Parallax, Jeff Johns writes in there how each Lantern's constructs are different. Like he's talking about like how John Stewart's one is more like meticulous because he's like an architect, and Kilowog's is like a cannon, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I have ever read.
It's like, they go into not only the depth of each color on the color wheel and like in the spectrum of each different ring, but like you said, they would go into the individual characters' use of that ring. Like you said, Kilowog is much more brutal and kind of like a cannon, and then Kyle Rayner, who I want to say is more of kind of the artist, has like he's like very creative type of constructs. And then you see like John Stewart, he's got like military constructs, like tanks and cannons and stuff like that. But you're right, it is very meticulous that as a military veteran, he's going to have meticulous constructs. Now, let me ask you this, though, because I never really looked farther into it, and I read a little bit of it, but I don't remember too much. What did you think about the Ultraviolet Corps that came out within the past few years?
I think that was a little weird, because I get what Scott Snyder was trying to do, but it just makes no sense. And I'm like, because here's the thing. I think it was too complicated. It didn't have to be too complicated. And I think you already had it as fine as it is. You could have John Stewart being like drafted, forced to wear a yellow lantern ring, and that would have been fine. But it's just like, I'm like, why? You already have this epic space opera, and you already have like what 5 other cores. Why are you adding? And then they added a gold one too, and I'm like, oh, come on, people.
Yeah, it's like now we're gonna get into the shades of different colored rings. The ultraviolet at first, because correct me if I'm wrong, it's like the color spectrum that is like unseen to the untamed eye or something like that. Yeah. So like at first I read that and I was like, that could be a cool concept, but like on paper it sounds cool, but actually written out and flushed out in a story, I just don't know where it would go. It has no place to go. It would just be, well, here's another one. So yeah.
That's actually exactly what it sounds like. Well, okay, we have to have another Lantern Corps. Let's just throw this in there. And I'm like, everything was fine. Stop improving upon perfection. This was perfection.
If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Yeah.
Exactly. That leads me to a question. Who is your favorite Green Lantern? I get the feeling it's John Stewart, but assuming it's not John Stewart.
It's funny because I do love John in his own way, because I resonate with him with the Marine Corps. I resonate with him with his character, his morals and everything. But as far as like an objective best Green Lantern, I think it really does have to be Hal. The fact that he was able to turn himself into living will, and I think that was Robert Venditti's run. I forget. Like that is just such a cool thought, and such a brilliant concept that Hal literally has the willpower to create his own ring and become will itself. I don't know. I just when Robert Venditti had made that storyline, it just kind of gave me a new like a new appreciation for Hal, and really kind of what he's gone through, and just because he's the OG, like original start to all of this. I think I think he's one of the most powerful and one of the most liked too.
Yeah, he's definitely the most powerful. I think that this was either in Jeff Johns or Venditti, but at one point, Hal is like captured by Yellow Lanterns. I think it was intentionally. And then the Lanterns call up Sinestro. Hey, we captured a Green Lantern. He's like, who is it? They say Hal Jordan. They're like, and Sinestro's like, oh no, kill him right now. He's about to destroy you. And then Hal just unleashes holy hell. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty dope. But in terms of, for me, okay, so I have kind of three. So number one is like Hal Jordan, because he's the OG.
Yeah.
He can turn himself into living will. And if that's not Green Lantern, that's Green Lantern. John Stewart, because I grew up on him, but also Jessica Cruz.
Oh.
Now, my reasoning for that is because, number one, she's an agoraphobic, but is given a ring where she's forced to constantly like overcome fear. And I'm like, that's a fantastic storyline. And I always point to her in diversity done right, because what you do is you just, because my whole thing is that you shouldn't make the characteristic that makes them a diverse character all that character is. They don't do that with Cruz. With Cruz, she just happens to be Latin American, but she's like one of the best Green Lanterns because she's constantly having to overcome fear. She has that challenge. She's not perfect, in other words.
That's I love that, and I respect that a lot, man. That's, and I had never really read a lot of her stuff, because once Robert Venditti had gone off the title of Green Lantern, and Hal wasn't in the picture anymore, or I think he was like a renegade at that point or something. When they brought her on board, I kind of was off comics for a little bit. I might have been on deployment. And so when that all happened, I didn't get to read a lot of her stuff. So that is a great interpretation of it, man. And I respect that a lot.
Yeah, she started off in Jeff Johns' Justice League run in the New 52, being a replacement for the Earth 3 evil Green Lantern. And then you see her, she has to first off master an evil Green Lantern ring. In fact, that was the return of Hal Jordan. They brought him in to like teach her how to run it. Yeah. So then she apparently dies, but it turns out the ring, which is actually like possessed by like this evil ring being called Volthoom, he's dead. And then the Green Lantern chooses her, saying that she has the ability to overcome great fear and all that stuff. And then during her series, it's all about her saying, I don't know if I can do this. I'm afraid to leave my house, but I'm supposed to be like this being that feels no fear.
Dude, that is really good writing. Because initially I had thought, John Stewart is like a perfect example of diversity done right.
Him too. Yeah.
Yeah, because not only is does he have much more of a character outside of his race, outside of his skin color, but they did this back in like the 70s or 80s, I want to say, when they first introduced him. So like they were doing this way before anyone else. And there's I don't know if you've read this before. I just found out about it like a couple months back, but there's a magazine by Tomorrow's Publishing, and it's called Back Issue, and it goes through like old keys and old, like, famous comic runs. And it goes through how it was created. It interviews some of the creators and some of the publishers and stuff. And one of the most recent magazines that came out was talking about John Stewart and how he came to fruition. And one of the first things they said was like, if we have a Green Lantern Corps, let's just start making as many Green Lanterns as possible. Let's have a planet Green Lantern. Let's have a, this alien Kilowog thing, Green Lantern. And they were like, and now we can start getting into more races, introducing more diverse characters into the Green Lantern Corps. And that's how John Stewart came to be. So I love that. And they wrote him as so much more than just, like we were talking about, so much more than just, here's my skin color, that's all I am. It's very surface level. They wrote him with so much more depth and meaning behind it than just, here I am, I'm just generic hero with a different skin color. It was so much more intentional and meaningful.
Exactly. They didn't make him also a clone of Hal Jordan, but just happens to be black. And I feel like that's one of the problems I have with modern comics, is that when they try and put in a diverse character, they just make him a clone of the character that they're trying to replace. And I'm like, first off, that's an insult to whoever you're trying to represent. And second off, that's upsetting the legacy of the original character too. So I'm like, there are many examples of this done right. Jon Stewart, Cruz, the entire X-Men cast. So I'm like, it's not like this is new.
That's such a great point, man. It very, like we said before, it's kind of lazy writing when you just take someone, put a different skin color on them, and then take the same template as a different hero. It does no service to the new character, because you're not writing them with any creative outlook in mind. And you look at John, and one of the things I've always thought, which is funny comparatively to Hal, is how much Hal tends to rebel against rules and regulations and stuff, and is kind of like this snarky, kind of confident, cocky guy who's like, you're not telling me what to do. I can do this on my own. And John, coming from a military background, is like, we are following the rules step by step. We are going this way. We're going to do it, the right way. So it is it's night and day differences, and you can see that very clearly. So once again, just a great example.
I'm just like, it's astounding when you see how there are such great examples, but recent comics just keep failing. So anyway, on a more positive topic, our third question, who is your favorite superhero and why?
So the generic, I guess, answer I would probably give would be Superman. I think and I think you and I can agree that just everything that you would want from a superhero is embodied by him. And
he
everything,
started the whole thing too.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he was really one of the, he was what Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster started with him, created not just Superman, but the industry of superheroes and comic books in general. So this thing blew up because of our Blue Boy Scout. And so Superman, in my opinion, is just the icon of what hope and meaning and passion and just everything. And his motto, truth, justice, in the American way. It really speaks. Yeah, it used to be. Sorry. Now it's better tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I hate that. I was talking to Wes about that, and I'm like, oh, come on, guys.
I think the thing that I was so upset about when it first came out, when they'd mentioned it, was it felt so divisive and politicized to make that decision. And it felt like they were trying to say that the American way isn't about freedom, isn't about truth, isn't about hope. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, being someone who has served, it just felt kind of like a kick to the nuts, because I was like, guys, come on, what are you trying to do to me? So I took it pretty personally, and I think rightfully so. Fans have every right to take things personally when those characters have changes made to them.
It's like, so actually, I don't know if you know about this, but EVS did a video analyzing it. And it turns out it wasn't because of like some desire for social change. It was just because they didn't have the copyright for Truth, Justice, the American Way. They couldn't keep it because it's too generic. You can't exactly copyright that phrase. So, and I was having a debate with someone about it, and they're like, well, they probably changed it because the American way is like racism and all that stuff. So ignoring the political debate, all I said was, actually, it was because of this. It wasn't because of some like, which is like everything these companies do. They are companies. And it's like, they're going to do this because they don't want to get sued. So I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and maybe a great segue into kind of the death of the Justice League, this new storyline, because from what I've been hearing, and on the same vein as copyright, a lot of these characters are coming up to a close on their copyright, you know, and a lot of the families that own them, like the Schusters and the Siegels for Superman and stuff, they don't want to pay these families the amount of money that it would take to re-up that copyright, you know, or that contract for the character. And so they're going to create these new characters and call them something a little bit different, so they don't have to pay the royalties to the families. I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory or not. That's just something I've heard. And because they are corporations, like you said, they do have to think about the money.
Couple of things on that. Well, first off, DC did already confirm that the Justice League is coming back at the end of Dark Crisis. So I'm like, well, oh really, DC? I didn't know that anyone that dies in these comic books comes back. Really? Do tell me more. It's like I love the public reaction to when they announced the death of the Justice League. Everyone's like, so?
Yeah, and so quickly too. Like you'd think they'd let them like, you know, have some peace for a year or so, but they're like, nope, they're coming right back, or they'll have their regular titles as, you know, as normal, coming out every month.
They're still doing that, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, so it's like, what's the point?
Yeah. And the funny part is that I love how they're like pursuing the replacement of their heroes for the copyright and also for the diversity and stuff and all that stuff. But I'm like, didn't Marvel try replacing their superheroes and it didn't work?
Yeah. DC has always, like, as a DC and Marvel fan, like I think we both can see the pattern of where Marvel does something and then a couple of years later DC does it, just because they're behind the curve by a few years, you know. But yeah, we've seen this with Marvel before, and it didn't really work out in their favor. There were a few characters that stuck though, like Miles Morales is like an international phenomenon. Like,
it's because he had that movie.
True. And you know what? I'm actually hot take, but I loved Into the Spider-Verse.
That's not a hot take at all. I love that movie. Are you kidding me?
Okay, cool. I didn't know. Like, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, it's just so stupid. It's like, why are all these Spider-Man?" And I was like, dude, it's so heartfelt, and it's just really like, the animation is absolutely beautiful.
It's a comic book.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It really is. Just it is a literal comic book on the screen. So I saw the film in theaters twice because I was so obsessed with it. I thought it was so good.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. My favorite now being No Way Home, because I grew up on the Tobey Maguire movies. I remember seeing those in theaters specifically. So to see him come through that portal, we all knew it was going to happen. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's actually happening.
Dude, my theater was going nuts when that happened. And the great thing about having those two in No Way Home was that they could, like, Sony could have taken the lazy way out and just shown them, you know, had them gone through the portal, and then it's like, hey, we're here, and then like they never utilized them. But
that's what I thought they were going to do.
Oh yeah, I was fully like, I was ready for them to just kind of key jangle, put something in front of us and just go, see, look, you know, and put a happy face on and then get rid of them. But it turns out, and this is why I loved it so much, was that, and after watching it again, I realized how great it was. But you know, they utilize Peter, they utilize Toby's Peter and Andrew Garfield's Peter in a way as like these older brother kind of father, like mentor towards Tom Holland's Peter. And so it's not like they didn't have anything to do. They were actually an integral part of why that movie had such great success. And, you know, we were talking about how to do diversity right. That's how you do multiple characters right. You know, multiple generations of characters. You utilize them in the story to build up the other characters. So
yes, exactly.
I thought it was well done.
Yeah, the theater, like, it's kind of funny. I came out of Endgame going, how are they going to top that? And then immediately that happens, and I'm like, okay, they just did. All right, there you go.
Yeah, it was pretty fun to watch. I also got a kick when when you saw Matt Murdock on the screen. That was probably my other favorite part.
That part is when my theater really exploded. And at that point, I was like, okay, they're definitely going to have all 3 Spider-Man in there, because if they got Matt Murdock in there, how hard is it for them to get the other Spider-Man in there?
Right. I was like, okay, we're in for a trip, because I had no idea that Charlie Cox, right? The actor?
Charlie Cox, yeah.
He kept it secret so well. Like, I had no idea he was going to pop up on
they
screen.
All did.
So, yeah, so it was cool to see him. Yeah, true.
But yeah, it was so dope. But I was a little disappointed it wasn't Ben Affleck's Daredevil, but I'll take it from there. That would have been hilarious.
That would. I don't like. I'm not sure how fans would have reacted, but that would have been pretty good.
And it's like, just kidding, and it's just Charlie Cox.
Yeah. So, going back to your question though about who's my favorite hero. Because I guess we had talked about Superman being like the essential or quintessential, like, you know, hero. Would you say the same thing? Is Superman your favorite, or do you have a?
Mine is actually 3. It's Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, but more so Superman, because here's the thing. I have a personal connection to Superman in that I have a vivid memory. I spent a lot of time in the hospital growing up. I had a bleeding disorder. So one of the earliest memories I have, I'm on like a 3-hour, like actually a 6-hour IV drip. And so they had a TV screen, and then one of the VHSs was one of the episodes of Justice League Unlimited. So I popped that in, and then that started the seed. And then I started to and then my dad showed me the old Christopher Reeve Superman movies.
Yeah.
And then for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why I liked this character so much. And then actually, when I read Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, and there's that wonderful scene where that girl's about to jump off the roof, and Superman comes up behind her and goes, "You are so much stronger than you think you are." And I'm like, that's it. That is what, and that's why I tell people, because I was having a conversation with someone. They're like, "Oh, Superman, he's so boring." And I'm like, here's what you don't realize about Superman. Yeah, he's invincible. Yeah, he's super strength. And yeah, he has all these powers. But the thing about Superman, he's not just a dude. He's an ideal. He's the ideal that you can overcome anything as long as you have the right determination and grit. And everything will always turn out for the best.
Dude, I love that so much. I couldn't have said it better myself. That when you mention him, you know, saving that woman and saying you are so much stronger than you think you are, it you know, gives you chills, just like the Green Lantern, the quote, like some of the things that Superman has said in his books, and you know, obviously Superman is a product of his writers as well, so I have to, you know, give credit to the writers. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that I've read from him is so endearing, and it gives you chills. Sometimes, you know, it makes you emotional. Like there was a comic by Daniel Warren Johnson that came out this year where he wrote Superman, and it made me, I mean, incredibly emotional. And I was like, dude, I'm reading a comic book right now. I can't believe that I am feeling so heavily about this story. So yeah, you're 100% correct in saying that it's kind of like the phrase, tell me you don't read Superman, or by telling me you don't read Superman, or what's that phrase or whatever. Because so many people, so many people will attribute Superman as just to the boring, goody two shoes, blue Boy Scout, but he has so much more going for him in his character than just, oh, I'm the nice guy. Like you said, it's an ideal. It's something to strive for. It's something to look up to. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with your pick. So.
Did you see the Snyder Cut?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
The reason why I asked about that is because that movie, the portrayal of Superman, actually brought me to tears, because There's that scene where first he shows up in the Kryptonian ship and you have his two fathers speaking to him, saying, repeating the lines from Man of Steel and BVS. Then he emerges and you finally hear his two fathers saying, "It's time, son, fly, be who you're meant to be." He takes up, he's wearing the black suit first off. And then this scene had my co-host and I freaking out like an Avengers Endgame, where Steppenwolf brings the axe down and it just lands on his shoulder. And Superman proceeds to, I coined this phrase in the show, whenever I say Superman destroys anyone, I say he not impressed them, because that's what's interesting about that scene. And it's a subtle subtext that when Superman shows up, you notice the Justice League all of a sudden can land hits on Steppenwolf. Like, he is the spirit of the league. When he shows up, it's not a fight against Steppenwolf.
It's such that's a great point. I do love the quotes from both fathers, kind of ushering him into life, back into the world. It's a beautiful portrayal of fatherhood and like that mentorship between father and son. And both, one from Krypton and one from Earth. And it's just a beautiful rendition of that. So I really did enjoy that as well. And the other thing is Superman wasn't making these goofy little quips, like the Whedon cut.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
He was making these like snarky remarks, and I'm like,
that's not Superman.
Is this? No, it's not at all. So it was much more true to form.
It was like when Whedon had Batman going, "I don't not like you." I'm like, have you ever read a Batman storyline? Have you?
Yeah, it was hard to watch at points. And to realize that Whedon had actually spent so much more money just to put in more jokes. There's a great video by Red Letter Media that breaks down the differences between the Whedon and Snyder Cut. And they were saying how most of the reshoots were to input jokes. Like, most of the money was to put jokes into the finalized theatrical film with Whedon as the main one. So it's sad to think that was what came to fruition, was just like, hey, let's put more jokes in it and spend $20 more million. Yeah.
Which is hilarious, because when you watch the Snyder Cut, the original version, it actually is pretty funny. There's actual jokes in it. And I'm like, so you're telling me, first off, watching a whole 4-hour movie, I've seen it 7 times. Oh, wow. And it's to the point where I'm like, why did you change this? Like the Flash going back in time, Superman destroying Steppenwolf, Darkseid's whole appearance in the movie.
Yeah.
But and you thought it would be a good idea to add a scene where Flash falls onto Wonder Woman's boobs. That was your priority.
It was so tone deaf. Like that whole thing was just so uncalled for. So I guess I could ask then. So that's cool. I was like, what you got there? That's pretty rad, man. I like that a lot.
I'm waiting until I can go to the beach and then take photos of this.
That will be epic. I wonder if you'll be able to control the seas with that thing when you get out there.
I do rule Atlantis, so
yeah. And that was the other thing with Aquaman. They had him like, he was much more of a comedic relief in the Whedon cut, where he's like this like surfer dude and not the king of an empire. There are two different characterizations of Aquaman. And
what's kind of funny is when my co-host and I were watching the Snyder Cut, the one scene that we were like, please be in the Snyder Cut, please be in the Snyder Cut, is when Cyborg catches him and Aquaman goes, "My man." We were like, yes, it's in the movie. We were like, yes. And I'm like, that's so Snyder. There's no way that's a Whedon joke.
Yeah, that's true. I think Whedon was the one who was making him scream or like do that weird Yahoo. Yeah, that thing.
I was like, it's so much more. It's so much better when he's just quiet as he just surfs in on a parademon.
Right. It was really it was quite something to see the two differences. I mean, because it was drastic. I didn't think it was going to be so different, but I greatly enjoyed the Snyder versus the Whedon, and it wasn't even a contest.
Well, we kind of started the podcast because of that. So
nice. Okay.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So you kind of started the channel and
Yeah.
the show and this podcast after seeing the Snyder Cut. Then
Not even after seeing it. It was after the movie was announced, because this was during the pandemic. And see, here's the thing: Justice League for the longest time was a stain on the DCEU, and it was like, it made me kind of sad to be a DC fan, because I'm like, the Justice League should have been this big, epic, grandeur movie, but it wasn't. So, and I remember my co-host and I get the feeling, you too, we did not think the Snyder Cut would be released. There's no way this is going to happen.
Yeah.
So I remember that day vividly. I'm getting out of the dentist. I'm going into a dentist appointment. It hadn't been announced yet. I get out. I'm checking Facebook, and then there's that Jurassic Park meme of Jeff Goldblum going that SOB did it. And I'm like, okay, it's from a DC like page. So I'm like, okay, what? I scroll down and I see the black and white Wonder Woman post that says Zack Snyder's Justice League. And let's just say I reacted like the movie theaters for Spider-Man No Way Home.
Wow.
And then for the longest time, I said I wanted to start a podcast, and it was either this or politics. Politics, because I'm a political science major. So I was like, okay, I can talk about this. But first off, way too negative. And second off, I find that I wanted to like escape all that stuff. And it's like, if I'm talking about politics constantly in class, I'm like, this is just not going to work. And then when I saw the Snyder Cut, and then my friend Lad and I FaceTime, and I'm like, this is what we should do.
Yeah, dude, what a great idea. I love that. And I think that's seriously what so many people on YouTube have been doing, and not just on YouTube, but on Spotify and like Rumble and all these different platforms, is they're trying to escape the activism and political narratives of like today's society, because it just seems more because like you'll see on Twitter everyone saying comics have always been political, or movies have always been political, or books have always been. Yes, 100%. And you as a poli-science major know this. I'm sure. I mean, you deal with it every single day. And so
I actually did. Okay. I'm sorry. For a paper I wrote in the summer, it was on the politics of comic books. I had a cool teacher like that. And yeah, when I looked at like how these books used to be, it really is. And you actually touched on it on your conversation with Reggie Collects with that quote by Stan Lee. It's like, yeah, it's in the background. It's not like in your face, like this is what we're doing. That's why I love the X-Men so much, and why I consider them like the gold standard of dealing with this stuff, because really they're using it. They take the concept of being othered in any way, whether or not you're a conservative, a liberal, black, white, it doesn't matter. If you're othered in any way, you can identify with these people. And I'm like, this is the way you do it. Not by having Jonathan Kent come out as bisexual, throw it in your face, and then have him protest climate change in a universe where there's characters that can change the climate like that. I'm like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It doesn't take your mind off of the political climate of things. It only exacerbates it, or it makes it worse. The your comment about the X-Men is so spot on, man, and I have to agree with you there, because after the show that I did with Reggie, so many people were coming into my DMs or were commenting on the video, and they were going, "What do you mean? Like X-Men has always been political. It's been about the civil rights movement." And I hate that take. I hate that argument, because, like you said, X-Men is for anyone who feels like they're on the fringe of society, anyone who feels other, anyone who feels like they don't fit in. That's the X-Men, not it's clear that, this side and this side and that's it. There wasn't an allegory about the civil rights movement. And Stan Lee is actually, there's an interview with him at a Comic-Con where he states, I never tried to make the X-Men an allegory for the civil rights movement. I just wanted to make a story that people could identify with, that felt like they were on the fringes, whether, Absolutely. Like you said, it was whether they're a liberal or conservative or black or white, or maybe you just feel like you don't fit into the popular crowd or to the sports crowd. You kind of have your own crowd, and that's what the X-Men do. And it's such a beautiful story, because they are the fringes of society, and so anyone can like relate to them, because I feel like everyone has at one point in time in their life has felt
everyone.
like, yeah, like maybe I don't fit in, and then
Yeah.
they read the X-Men and they go, man, I fit in with these guys though.
It's like
it's cool.
it's like how I mentioned before. I grew up with a bleeding disorder. I couldn't necessarily do it. I couldn't necessarily go run out and play with the other kids. I turned out later I couldn't. I was just worrying for no reason. But besides the point, it's like at the time it was more like, yeah, I couldn't do what everyone else was doing. And then when I found out superheroes, it turns out this is why I love superheroes so much. Mm-hmm. They took what makes them unique. In other words, they're taking what makes them different from other people and are using that to help people, and are turning that negative into a strength, particularly the X-Men, because some of them have really terrible powers, like Geek, who's basically a bird. This one dude that his powers, he has the powers to explode once.
Yeah. That's awful. But yeah, I mean, you're right, man. You can identify with them though, not because of your skin color, not because of your political identification, but because you have been in a situation where maybe you didn't fit in. And that is so much more of a broad entry for people. Like anyone can identify with that. So I think that's what's beautiful. It's like anyone can come to the X-Men and read it and enjoy it. It doesn't have to be something. Whereas like now, you pick up a comic book, and most of them that I read, I go, well, this really isn't for me. So I pick up another one, and it's like, all right, well, this one isn't for me either, And then you continually pull books, and you're like, man, how many can they write that aren't for me anymore? There are very few now that are meant for the normal audience of readers.
Yeah, it's like with me, I don't really read any of the new stuff. The way I keep up with the new stuff is I watch your guys' channel. But it's like the newest thing I read was Endless Winter. That's it. It's because because the other stuff just doesn't, it's observable that's not as higher quality as it used to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, as a hardcore DC fan, I routinely, one of the reasons why I was a DC fan is because I think, from my perspective, I think DC had like the more legendary and world-renowned storylines. Nowadays, it doesn't seem like that.
That's a great point because they really do have storylines that like are so otherworldly, like with multiverses and stuff like that. Marvel is much more of a street level hero. You've got your Daredevils and your Wolverines and your like Iron Fists and stuff like that, where these are guys that are just going to the streets and kicking butt, stopping crime, but it's all street level. And DC was like galaxies, universes, like we were talking about.
Gods among men.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So you and I think, both have a strong connection with the affinity of the larger scale of DC and how well it could be done, or how beautiful like we can envision it being, but we just haven't had someone come around and do it yet. So speaking of which, what are your thoughts on this new Batman film that comes out in like a week?
Okay, so I'm very excited for it because first, I'm one of the guys that, I wasn't really that sure about Robert Pattinson playing Batman because my ex-girlfriend once made me watch Twilight and that scarred me. Emphasis on X, by the way. But it's like, as soon as I saw that first trailer they dropped in fandom where he like completely tears apart that criminal, I'm like, that is Batman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, and it's like that one scene where I'm kind of like, okay, is the scene in like the second trailer where he's walking down that corridor and they're shooting at him, but he's just walking through the bullets like Superman. And I'm like, what the heck? That
might be, because like I haven't read as much Batman as I have Superman. However, I know enough that like Batman is supposed to be like this ninja-esque type of skilled master to be able to kind of hide in the shadows or conceal himself to his enemies, and he's just kind of walking down with this like tank armor. I'm like, that's not who he is,
I mean, I'll give you a shot because I was very nervous about Ben Affleck playing Batman because of Daredevil. But then when I saw Batman versus Superman, and is that scene in the warehouse where it basically turns into an Arkham game. I'm like, yeah, 100%. This is my Batman, man.
You know what's funny is speaking of the Ben Affleck Daredevil, is we're gonna see Colin Farrell, not Colin Farrell Bullseye from the movie, but Colin Farrell Penguin, right? I think,
and that. You would never know it's Colin Farrell.
I seriously didn't know like till a couple weeks ago. Like I kid you not, I had no idea. And then I looked at IMDb or someone told me or something, and I was like, "You're pulling my leg. There's no way that that's Colin Farrell." But,
there's absolutely no way. Yeah. Whoever did the makeup on that should get the Oscar right now. Because I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I mean, it also just goes to show how great of an actor Colin Farrell is, because he's like an Irishman, and every film I've ever seen him in, he's never doing his normal Irish accent, except for maybe like In Bruges, which is a kind of an indie film. But
and Bullseye, kind of.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah. No, you're right. That's man.
That was the one part of that movie. That was the one part about the Daredevil movie that I will say was awesome, was his portrayal of Bullseye. Besides that, it was all like, this is not good. Although it did introduce me to the band Evanescence. So I'm like, okay, there's that one point in the movie.
So yeah, that really was, man, you're bringing me down nostalgia lane, man.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting era of comic book movies, because we had like Blade, we had Daredevil, and then we had the first X-Men. Really?
I still haven't seen Blade. Wes made fun of me for that in the last interview. But
did
yeah,
it? Oh,
I haven't
man.
seen Blade.
Okay, well, I will have to. I'll have to follow Wes's. What would you call it? I won't make fun of you for it. Yeah, I'll follow his example. But I will say, it's a great watch. It's a lot of fun. It's it's not an Academy Award winner by any means, but it's just it's the only R-rated Marvel movie of its kind, and it's super fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a lot of those movies I just never got the chance to. My first superhero movie was really a Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1. And then I went on into other different movies. I suffered through Spider-Man 3 with their portrayal of Venom, only to be delighted at Tom Hardy's Venom. And I'm like, finally someone gets it.
Oh, interesting. I of course, I really didn't enjoy the portrayal in Spider-Man 3, but honestly, I didn't really like the portrayal of Tom Hardy either. I've said this with a couple of my friends before. I really think that Venom lends itself to be a horror film more than an action film.
I said this when I did a character episode on Venom. The movie should have been rated R.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. It should have been terrifying, because Eddie Brock has this kind of, he has a psychosis with the symbiote. The reason why the symbiote attaches itself to him, because he's about to kill himself, and which is a very dark, take on itself. So then you have this dark take with this dark symbiote who's taking control over him. And then he has this fear of loneliness, so that if the symbiote leaves him, he's now so afraid of being alone that he would rather take this horrifying entity, this alien symbiote. He'd rather have that with him than be alone. It's a really dark take on a character. So I think it would lend itself much, much better to be a horror film. And I think it would be much more telling if Eddie Brock was more tortured as opposed to kind of a funny guy.
And a loser. Yeah.
Right. So, but I do see the portrayal from Tom Hardy. I know that a lot of people really like the portrayal, and I had nothing wrong with it. I just feel like there could be something made that maybe a little bit better.
That's true. I do really like that that bust of Venom you got in the
Oh yeah. Oh nice. No, it's this over on this side. Yeah.
But speaking of superhero movies, you'll actually appreciate this. So I was trying to find a movie to watch with my mom, and then she for some reason we were going through Apple, and then the Punisher movie came up with Thomas Jane, I think, or something like that. It's the first one. And then she goes, "Oh, I love that movie." And I'm like, "You love The Punisher?" Because she's not really into violent movies and The Punisher. And the funny part is that she didn't even know it was a Marvel movie.
Oh, wow.
And I go, wait a second. It has a Marvel logo in the beginning. It says Marvel Studios. But she's like, I know I didn't see it, but I think it's because she likes revenge movies, and really, I would argue there's not a better revenge story than The Punisher, because every other good like a revenge story, whether or not that be John Wick, have copied more or less the Punisher archetype.
100%. That's a great observation, man. It really is kind of this guy who's looking for vengeance. He's looking for well, vengeance is more of a Batman thing. He's looking more for like retribution. He's like, this is now his life's purpose, is to just kill. So I when I first saw the Punisher film, it was like weirdly, oddly beautiful, because it was like so horrifying that something would happen to his family like that, and then so horrifying that this man would then just completely give himself to this new life of just murder, you know, like torturing people. But it was definitely a fun movie. I remember, you know, watching it as a young, I'd say like young kid, young adult, teen-ish. I forget when that movie came out, but what's her name? The actress who played Mystique in the first few X-Men films, she's actually the woman who is like his apartment like neighbor.
She's the neighbor?
Yeah. How weird is that?
Wow.
Yeah, that's a throwback, man. But she looks great in that movie.
What if they're connected and this was the first MCU?
See, she was Mystique the whole time. I sure had no idea.
It was Agatha all along. It was Mystique all the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would be something. That would be a fun like little fan fiction, you know. But she's a great actress and does well.
Speaking of Punisher, I happen to have the action figure of when he was in the War Machine armor.
Oh, nice, dude. That's rad.
That was one of the coolest storylines, because it's like, of course he would get in the War Machine armor.
Oh, yeah. He would be pretty much invincible at that point in time.
And I love, because in that storyline, Nick Fury just sends him to retrieve the armor. And Frank's like, oh, no, I'm keeping this.
He's like, yeah, right. You think I'm going to give this back over to you? I'm taking it for myself. And if that doesn't speak... Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if that doesn't speak to who the Punisher is, like, he is so against authority and everything. Yeah. He's just like, he doesn't give a crap about anything. So, yeah, it's pretty it was a fun storyline to read him taking over that armor.
Yeah. So what do you think of the new Punisher logo?
Ooh, I think it's really insensitive to one, Punisher fans, and two, any type of like native Asian culture or community.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, and I'm not trying to virtue signal or anything, I just think it looks bad. Like,
it does look bad. Compared to what's on his chest in the previously, it's way worse.
Oh, yeah, 100%. It just looks so generic and just kind of, it looks like someone like drew it on a napkin and was like, let's just do this, you know, like make a version of this or something. But it wouldn't make, it's, you know, everyone talks about like, oh, it's cultural appropriation. And I'm thinking like, well, I guess, yeah, but like, it just looks bad, you know, like, yeah, it could be cultural appropriation of this culture. It could be a kick in the nuts to all the Punisher fans. It may be both. Overall, it just looks bad. They're not going to like own anyone. Like, you're not going to, because I know the big thing is like, well, we need to stick it to these people because these people like Punisher and we can't let them like Punisher. It's such a weird thought process. You know, Wes was talking about it on his podcast this morning on the Aficionados, and they were talking about how the Punisher logo has been on almost every military uniform or logo, like ever. And I remember the
if you saw an American Sniper, it's all on their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they would go through. I remember the initial push through like Iraq and especially like through Fallujah. They would take the Punisher logo and they would spray paint it onto buildings that they had cleared. You know, and it's kind of a sign of like warning and a sign of like, hey, listen, don't do anything stupid because we're now occupying this territory. And so it was something of a fear tactic. It was like a logo that was meant to instill fear. And I just remember even my unit that I deployed with, I went to Iraq, and the unit that I was with, our logo was the Skull Punisher. It was on all our t-shirts, it was on all our patches, it was on all our hats. Like everything that we owned was a Punisher logo. And if you asked any one of my guys in my platoon, I'd be like, hey, do you know who Frank Castle is? They'd be like, who? Like no one no one would know. What? Yeah, they just think it's a cool, logo. But
I may or may not have two Punisher t-shirts because my mom, who's again not really into the skull motif, is like, buy two Punisher t-shirts. Yes.
Yeah, why not, dude? Get one for like one that you can like maybe work out in, and then another one that you can just wear, out to the bar or something. I used to have a Punisher t-shirt that was like, it had the big skull on there, and I like made it into a tank top, and I just wore it to the gym. Awesome. And everyone hated it though, like because obviously people think that it's like, oh well, if you wear this, you're associated with this. It's ridiculous. But,
I'm like, as if there haven't been crazy people that wore the Superman logos, and DC's not going to change the Superman logo.
Dude, there have been crazies that have wore the Batman logo. They think they're
sure
vigilantes, and they're like, I am the night, I am vengeance. And yeah, people are going to wear the logo whether you like it or not. And that's just when you make a really famous character, it's just going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I have two more questions for you.
Ooh.
Number 4, favorite comic event?
Ooh, comic event. So this, I know I said, this was a hot take earlier about the SnyderVerse movie. This might actually be a hot take, and people might not enjoy my.
Oh boy!
But it's the most recent one that I can remember. I actually, really surprisingly, I like the King in Black tie-in events through Marvel.
That was great.
So I don't know, man. It was just something cool about, you've got Venom, Silver Surfer, Wolverine, Captain America. Like you have all these different people fighting Null for the lives of Earth before he takes it over, before his symbiote army takes over. I don't know, man. It was just super metal and cool, and it was just, it was dope.
Particularly when he takes Thor's hammer and Silver Surfer's board and combines them into a giant axe. Oh, I was like, oh, that is so cool.
You're right. Okay, that is very, very cool, and I totally forgot that he did that. But yeah, like just stuff like that. As far as like the other events, I guess I could say Blackest Night, Brightest Day. And maybe, the thing that kicked that all off was the Sinestro Corps War, but I don't know. Like, do you remember if it was an event that spanned across all the other DC titles, or was it just?
Sure. I'm not sure because the Green Lantern books are pretty much all in space. So
yeah, so I think it was just
It's still, I'll still count it because that was an amazing storyline. It's just, I love when the Guardians are talking about like not killing, and all of a sudden like 80 Green Lantern rings show up from slain lanterns, and they're all like, "The hell?"
Yeah. Oh my god, dude, that's wild. So yeah, I guess I would probably say those two. If I thought about it more, I could probably come up with a better answer. But those are just the two.
Those are great. My favorite are Justice League: The Dark Side War, because the whole idea about how the first off, it's the Anti-Monitor versus Dark Side.
Yeah.
And then it's like the Justice League becoming gods, like Superman, the god of strength, the Flash being the god of death, Batman becoming a total a-hole when he gets all the knowledge in the universe.
Oh yeah, because he's on the Mobius chair, right?
Yeah. Or he's like, the chair gives me all I need. And I'm like, that's sounding kind of creepy, Bats. And my favorite thing he did, it was in a tie-in, he visits Joe Chill and goes, "I'm Bruce Wayne."
Oh, so good, dude. That's pretty cool.
Like, oh, that's so... And then Kingdom Come.
Oh, okay. Is that because if we're counting that as like an event, I will say Kingdom Come.
I'll say that counts.
Okay, then that's top.
Because, like, first off, Alex Ross's art.
Dude, every page is like a paint. It really is just like you could blow up one of those pages and like hang it in an art gallery. It's every page is flawless.
When I was making the thumbnail for our episode in Kingdom Come, I actually had a hard time picking which image do I want to use for this, because this is all, they're all fantastic. And then when you think about it,
so good.
Kingdom Come is one of the best stories analyzing Superman specifically, because it's seeing him dealing with a universe that's all cool killing.
Yeah, so true, man. And I really enjoyed the costume design on everyone too. Like the red and black symbol for Superman.
That was dope.
And the Alan Scott Green Lantern and everything. Like
armor.
I don't know, the cool armor.
And the golden Wonder Woman armor with the eagle.
Yes. Yeah, dude. So there were some cool there were some really great costume designs for that. So yeah, and it was great because it was kind of a one-off. It was like not an Elseworld story, but it was just okay.
And they kind of made a sequel to it, but they only made like one sequel series to it.
I would the only other thing that I guess I would say from Marvel, another like tie-in event that was pretty big, or like crisis level event, would be Annihilation.
Okay, that's a cool one.
Yeah, so I think that one's pretty cool. I haven't read the entire series, but from what I read, I really enjoyed it. But it's got like it's all space stuff. It's all Silver Surfer, Nova, stuff like that.
Yes.
And I love that that environment, that atmosphere of like space. It's got Guardians of the Galaxy and all that cool stuff. So
in terms of Marvel, I have three. So number one is Siege.
Oh yeah, okay.
I loved it, the whole idea, because there's that fantastic scene where Tony Stark is fighting the Void and he just crashes a helicarrier on it. So I'm like, that's one way to deal with it.
That was like mid 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
and that's one of the few books that Brian Michael Bendis wrote that I'm like that I don't have a problem with.
There are good Bendis books out there. You just kind of have to look for them. So.
It's just not anything from DC.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I'm still recovering from his Superman run.
We all are. It's been especially because there was such a huge juxtaposition between Peter J. Tomasi's run and then Bendis.
Yes.
Like we're getting gold as opposed to like tin. It was such a gnarly change. So yeah, I'm hard pressed to think that, like, I don't know, if we were to get a Bendis run just without Peter J. Tomasi's run, it may have been received a little bit better. But because we got something so well done and then Bendis on Superman, it was like.
And then he aged up John Kent and made it like imply like Lois Lane was cheating on Clark Kent with Lex Luthor, and I'm like, what? Again, going back to what we said earlier, who is editing these books?
Yeah, it was like, man, it was so tough because it's the classic trope of the bad father, the bad dad. Like Jor-El is a bad dad. Superman, Clark Kent is a bad dad. Like no one has, there are no male role models in Bendis's run. So it's like, God, man.
It's like I'm sure, and I remember Wes's favorite scene is when Jor-El just takes John Kent on a trail, and Superman's cool with it.
Yeah, he's just like, okay, yeah, take my son.
I'm like, wait a second. First off, going back to what you said about bad fathers, Superman should be the best father ever.
Yeah,
he's Superman,
and he was raised by Jor-El in a way, but not Bendis's Jor-El, because Bendis's Jor-El is kind of like insane. I don't know.
Yeah, he was evil.
I get weird vibes from him, and but then he was also raised by Pa Kent, who is like the role model for father figures. So it really Superman should be one of the best fathers out there, which is why Peter J. Tomasi's run did so well, because it was about fatherhood. So.
Going back to my favorite Marvel runs. Okay.
So go ahead.
Number 2 is another Bendis book,
Oh my
It's
gosh.
Avengers versus X-Men.
Oh really? Okay. I've heard a lot
Because
of polarizing things.
because I'm a huge fan of the X-Men, and
Mhm.
I love the idea of, because I think that's the closest Marvel can get to Injustice. And it's the whole idea about how it was another way of doing a Civil War story without doing Civil War. And
Okay.
I think that if they could have labeled that Civil War 2, it would have been way better than the actual Civil War 2.
For sure. Yeah.
Plus, I love the design for like Scott Summers as the Phoenix. I was like, that is so cool.
As opposed to, yeah, what they're doing with the Phoenix now and some of the costumes that they have for
Where Phoenix is Thor's mother. I'm like, what? Again, who's editing this book?
Yeah. It's, I haven't been keeping up with the most recent Phoenix, so I can't speak to that. Excuse me, but yeah, the Avengers versus X-Men will definitely go down in history as like one of the larger events that really, you know, took comics by storm. So
yeah, and then number 3 is House of X, Powers of 10, because my thing, because, and Comic Historian actually explained this perfectly. One of the reasons why he wasn't a big fan of the X-Men is because it's always the same story over and over and over again. The X-Men save everyone. The X-Men don't trust, the humans don't trust the X-Men. The X-Men save everyone. The humans don't trust them anymore. Where with this one, it's like the X-Men were like, okay, we're just going to go live on an island and be our own island nation. And just like saying, screw all of you.
Yeah. There are like with the House of X, Powers of X, where it could have gone, I think had a ton of potential too, because like we never really even got to see the fruition of like that come to fruition, I guess. And so now Krakoa has just been preyed upon so heavily that like I'm so sick of Krakoa by this point. But that original idea of them being on Krakoa, I think, was a great creative outlook on it. So when it first started, yeah, absolutely. When it first started, everyone was on board, but now they've just kind of pushed it in the ground. It's like, oh, Krakoa again. But yeah, that's a great event.
Yeah, and I'm like, there were some ideas that I wasn't a big fan of, like Scott Summers, Jean Grey, and Wolverine being in a threesome relationship. And I was like, again, who is that?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Who is editing this book can basically be copy pasted into every time I read one of these incidents, because it's like, what? Well, why is this happening?
Yeah, they're supposed to be not the gatekeepers, but the final say before, like that's why they're called editors. They're supposed to edit this stuff down to be able to say, is this within continuity? Is this within character continuity, not just story continuity? It's much more than just, oh, I'm going to change this punctuation because grammatically it looks better. Like, no, there are the historians of these tales that are having to make sure that everything lines up correctly. And a lot of them just don't care.
Yeah, they're obviously not doing their jobs. All right, now I actually have 2 more quick questions. So. Okay. Now, going back to Superman, and this is a debate that's been going on the channel for so long. I even asked Wes this question.
Ooh.
Now, and this will determine if we can remain friends.
Right. Oh boy, here we go.
All right, who does Wonder Woman work in a relationship with more, Superman or Batman?
First, I'll ask, what did Wes say?
Wes said Batman.
Really?
Because he likes the whole opposites attract thing, but I'm like, ugh.
No, okay, like for me, it's very simple. I think Wonder Woman would work better with Superman. Yes. Thank you. I think Wes and I will have to disagree on this one. I think so. With Wonder Woman, I honestly think she works best. That was a great run.
That run. Yeah, we actually could cover this entire storyline in the show, and cool. It's actually really good. Speaking of good Wonder Woman stories too, I'm like, oh my gosh,
dude, right on, brother. That is such a great pull, and I'm glad you brought that up. That is kind of a gem that not a lot of people talked about. But it was, short-lived, but it was really fun when I read it. I had a blast picking that up every week and getting, or every month, and getting to read that.
The hilarious part is on the Instagram, I posed a question, who does Wonder Woman fit with SuperWonder Batman? A lot of them said Batman. And then I said, but if you read the comic book series Superman Wonder Woman, and then people legitimately posted, there was a comic book series?
Yeah.
And then to the point where I'm like, all right, lad, we're doing episodes on this. We got to do this. It's an emergency.
Dude, I'm so excited because now I'm gonna, after this, I'm gonna go head over to your channel and watch that video.
I have a whole playlist. I have a whole playlist on all the volumes, all the romantic histories of the two. We actually had a debate recently on why the Wonder Woman Batman thing doesn't work. And I said, okay, as an Elseworlds, it's fine as an Elseworlds because then you can change the characters to fit each other. And they've done that before with Dark Knight's Metal or something like that. But main continuity Batman, particularly taking into account Tower of Babel, where Batman has a plan to kill every member of the Justice League, it will not work, particularly when you take into account that Wonder Woman's whole central tenet is truth. And Batman lies to people every single time he opens his mouth.
The other thing with Batman, and I was talking to Joshua McDonald. He's been on the Aficionados every now and then, but Josh is a huge Batman fan, and I think he actually likes Nightwing the most. Like that's his favorite of the Bat family.
Nightwing.
Yeah, who doesn't love Nightwing? But what he and I came to the conclusion of is we were talking about what would Batman be like in a relationship, and he can't be in a relationship because the relationship that he's in right now is one with Gotham. Like the relationship that he has is solely to protect Gotham. He's obsessed with trying to enact vengeance upon every criminal within Gotham. And he will never give up his fight until the day until the day that he dies. He'll never give up that fight. Exactly. And so even if he had a woman at his side, she would go insane because he would never take care of her. He'd never be around. He would always be fighting for Gotham and not for her. So I think that would be the reason why Wonder Woman would say, listen, this thing isn't working out. But so
there was this great series, and I used this as evidence. And so, well, first off, I actually my co-host gave me my piece of evidence for me. He was trying to use it. So there's that scene in Justice League where Wonder Woman's coming on to Batman, and he goes, first, dating in the team always leads to issues. I'm a rich kid with issues, and you're an immortal princess. So I'm like, lad, you're giving me my evidence for me. Then there was that comic book series that did. It's called Wonder Woman Brave and the Bold. I forget who wrote it. But anyway, Wonder Woman and Batman go into an alternate dimension for 10 years. 10 years their time. So they have this thing. The issue ends with them leaning in like they're going to kiss. And then the funny part is that the next issue is Wonder Woman and Batman both saying, no, this won't happen. This will never happen. It's almost like DC is telling these people, not going to happen.
It's as much as people want to play the will they won't they game, it's not, it should, at least in my opinion, it shouldn't happen. It wouldn't be a good relationship. Batman,
it would last all of 10 seconds.
Exactly. They might kiss and then they might realize, you know what, this isn't great. But in the Justice League animated series, they hint at it, they flirt all the time, but ultimately, like we were saying before, Batman is not one to date someone. He just, that's not his character. He's not going to want to be with someone. He's too involved in his fight against Gotham. So I
mean, we all know how much trouble he has dating Selena Kyle. So that's not
exactly.
Even she's a better match for Batman.
Right? Yeah. And even they won't get together. So
yeah, and once again, going back to the Superman Wonder Woman series, I told Lad, I have I have 5 volumes of evidence on why this works more than, because also here's the thing, we've Superman and Wonder Woman, the only ones where their relationship has gotten an in-continuity story.
Oh yeah.
They've never done that with Batman and Wonder Woman, so I'm like, it's not going to work. And chances are it's an interesting concept. And then my co-host brought up, well, she could change Batman. Batman is never going to change. DC is never going to change their cash cow that if they stop publishing Batman, the joke goes around comic book shops and close down.
Oh, so true. Yeah. If they got rid of Batman, DC would be dead in the water. There would be nothing left for them to sell at that point in time.
Particularly with their current writing staff, but that's besides the point.
Exactly. Sorry if you heard any noise earlier. That was my cat letting himself out of the room. So
okay. All right. Last question. So, and this is kind of a more general one. What inspired you to start your YouTube channel?
That's another great question, man. These are all great. So for me, I was still active military about a year ago. I only got out. I got out probably 9 months ago now.
Hey, congratulations.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. So as of at the time of this video, probably 9 or 10 months. And so when I got out, I had now had the opportunity, I had time to get back into my hobby of like reading comic books again. So I started pulling out all my old trade paperbacks and all my old single issues, and I was still collecting, but not as much as I wanted to. So I said, now that I'm out of the Marine Corps, I'm just going to go all in and really make this hobby more of a passion than just kind of a side thing. And as I was reading all of these comics, old and new, I started gathering this new appreciation for them, but started to realize just kind of how odd it was to see the new stuff. And there was something that didn't feel right. I didn't understand what it was. And I was looking through kind of why I felt off, why some of these more modern comics weren't making me feel the same way that I used to when I would read them. And I was like, maybe it's me, maybe it's just my time in the Marine Corps that I have a new outlook on reading comic books, and that might just be it. But then I went to YouTube and I was watching all these comic book, creators and YouTubers that were doing reviews on books and saying the same exact things that I was feeling. And so I finally had a place where I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly why they were putting words to my feelings. And so I started really getting into all these YouTube channels, and I finally decided, with the time on my hands, why not start vocalizing my opinion as well? Because who knows, what is going to happen to our hobby. And that's not just comic books. We're now seeing that with the Lord of the Rings. We're now seeing that with Star Wars and Star Trek. Like almost everything that we've been fans of is now being taken over by activism and politics. And and a lot of, I said that on the Reggie show, and a lot of people did not like me for saying that, but yeah, so like I said, I started becoming friends with Gary from Nerdrotic, Wes from Thinking Critical, all these really great channels that have gathered so much information and a great following from the comic book collecting community, that I just said, you know what, all right, it's time for me to start my own and go from there. And then thankfully everyone's been super responsive, and the channel has been growing great, and I have opportunities to meet people like you, man, which is super fun because we get to talk about the stuff that we love, and so it's been a good start, probably 6 or 7 months now, that's just been doing this channel, so it's been great.
Yeah, I've been doing my channel for about 2 years, and the reason why it's been like kind of slowish is because I was doing school at the time, so I had to focus on that and do and be able to graduate and everything. I did do that, so I'm like, okay. So now I'm trying to devote more time into this, because let me put it this way: conceivably, I could make this could be my full-time job, just talking about this stuff and meeting awesome people like you, just talking about all this stuff that has helped me through some really rough times in life.
That's such a great point, man. Yeah, and if there have been people that just blow up overnight, and other people who grind for years, but ultimately, if it is their passion and they end up making money from it, dude, that's the end game. That's the goal, is to be able to talk about something that you love, create, and turn your passion into something that you can earn a salary or earn an income from it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to looking through some of your library, man, because it sounds like you've got some great stuff, some great videos. So I'll have to look through those and you know, catch the re-recording or whatnot, or the stream later, so that I can watch them, and then I'll get back to you and go, oh man, we got to do another video about this, or we got to talk
Absolutely.
about this.
You're always welcome on the show. It's great. It's
Cool,
kind of
yeah,
surreal though, because I've been watching you guys for a while, and to get to talk to you guys, I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, if anything, Wes is a celebrity.
Yes.
You know,
Dude, I was so nervous for that interview because I've been watching you for like 2 years, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Wes has had, I mean, because Wes was the first channel that I found, actually. Like, he was my first introduction into all of this stuff. Were you like watching some of his reviews, or were you watching, what kind of?
I started, actually, here's how I started with him, because I was doing a video on how to fix Marvel. We were doing an episode on how like repair Marvel at the time. And I just Googled it, and his video where he was talking with Perch about it came up, and I was like, I like this guy. And then I saw his podcast, and I was like, I like podcasts. I might as well just check out what they had. And then I was very entertained by Doc, and I asked, and like the only thing I disagree with them is their hatred for Zack Snyder, but that's besides the point. So.
Dude, yeah, I will say I give you props, and I feel bad because there are a lot of people who hate on Snyder.
For no reason too. It's like, okay.
So hey, I give you like I said, I give you props and credit for sticking true to your guns, because with all the hate out there and everyone saying this or that, like, for you to be so solid and like, no, this is my Justice League, you know, I love that. That's cool.
Yeah, because ultimately, here's the thing: the Justice League specifically, the Snyder Cut is the most important superhero movie in my life, because I told you, I have a very intimate connection to the League because of all these early experiences with pain and suffering, and then having them to help me escape. So when I saw the Snyder Cut, I was like, I finally have the team. And
it really is, yeah, the first.
And when I tell people is that, here's the thing: you can hate Zack Snyder, you wouldn't have the Wonder Woman or Aquaman that you apparently love were it not for Zack Snyder.
True. That is very true. He did kind of come up with those archetypes of them in film, like adaptation, I guess. So,
and if you look at all the things that they critique him for, like he shouldn't have done Justice League so soon. That was all Warner Brothers. They wanted to keep up with the MCU, so it was nothing like he wanted to write a Justice League movie. He would have been fine just doing Man of Steel and leaving.
Yeah, it seems like it's another thing where it's like, the corporations, you know, of Warner Brothers or whatnot. Same thing with like the comic books. It's the editorial staff or the publishing companies that are kind of dictating what the creatives are doing, which makes it seem like the creatives are like tarnishing a lot of this stuff, which there are creators that are bad writers or bad storytellers. I don't know, man.
I have to say that.
Joss did an amazing Avengers movie. You know what I mean? Like, when that first Avengers film came out, like that was the first time we had seen a superhero team like that on screen, other than the X-Men film, I think. So.
And then he did Avengers 2, and everyone got sad again.
Yeah, and they didn't really. It wasn't.
I was like, I don't like that, because first off, you pair the Hulk with Black Widow. What? Yeah. When Steve Rogers is right there, you just set that up in Winter Soldier. Fantastic movie.
Yes, Winter Soldier. Really, truly, I think maybe one of the best. If it wasn't for Infinity War, I think Winter Soldier would be the best Marvel MCU film.
My dad and I recently completed a watch through like every MCU movie, and after we finished watching Infinity War, at the end of Infinity War where everyone's dead, he turns to me and he goes, "Man, walking out of that theater must have been like a surreal experience, because if you remember the experience, it was dead quiet." Dude,
it was so chilling. Because like no one knew what to do. Like everyone just stayed in their seats because they were like, how am I supposed to feel? Like no movie in recent history that I can think of has ever done that before. The only movie that I can think of where I got like chills, but it was chills of like hope and inspiration, were the Lord of the Rings trilogy like films, but chills of like sorrow and confusion and like grief was Infinity War, where you were like, I don't know what
Yes.
to think right now. So it was very, very polarizing for a lot of people, but still a
And then they
beautiful
follow it
story.
up. And they followed up with Endgame, where everyone comes back to life, and Captain America is finally wielding the hammer.
Which was, I mean,
Oh my gosh!
though I do enjoy Infinity more than Endgame. That scene alone was just such. It was really a big,
my favorite Marvel character is Captain America. So to see
Okay.
him finally get that moment, because they tried to, because they kind of hinted at it in Age of Ultron, which,
Yeah,
by the
yeah.
way, was a bastardization of the Age of Ultron storyline. But I digress. But to see him finally whip that hammer and just completely go to town on Thanos, I was like, thank you, Russo brothers. Thank you.
You got to give it to them. They were able to provide that fan service to the audience when he picked up that hammer, and Thor's like screaming. He's going, yeah, like,
I knew it.
yeah, I knew it. That's right.
And
So,
then the under left, and then everyone comes through the portal. And I was like, it's kind of interesting now. The Chadwick Boseman coming through the portal kind of hits it a lot different now.
Dude, oh my god, I never even thought because I haven't gone back and watched those movies, so I'm gonna have to do that now that you say that. Oh, that hurts my heart, bro. But yeah,
It's
it's
a lot different.
for sure. I can believe that. But,
All right, so that's. I think we're gonna call it an episode for that one. Max, you're always welcome on the show. This was awesome.
dude, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be able to be on here and talk with you, especially after talking with Wes as your last interview. But yeah, we'll definitely do this soon, brother. And I look forward to seeing where your channel grows and where it goes, because obviously you are so passionate about this stuff and you have such a great outlook on everything that it was really cool getting to talk to you and get to know you. So
Absolutely.
looking forward to future videos.
Thank you for responding to your Instagram DMs.
Oh, of course, dude. I've DM'd people before and they don't respond, and it's kind of like, yeah, it sucks, but sometimes people are super busy. But thankfully, I'm always up for doing stuff like this, so I love it.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed this awesome interview, and I hope I see the views come in like I did for the West interview. I have high expectations now. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. Stay heroic, and see you guys next week. See ya.